Welcome, everybody. We're excited for today's webinar. We're going to be talking about games buyers play and what you can do about it. Now, we've got a great guest. I'll introduce him and myself here in just a minute. But looks like we've got a handful of stragglers coming in. So we're going to give them just another minute before we get cracking. And while we wait, going to play a brief customer spotlight of DocuSign and InsideSales.com and our relationship.
DocuSign provides electronic signatures to both consumers and businesses.
So one unique thing about DocuSign that's different from a lot of tech companies is we're pervasive in so many different industries and every horizontal within all those different industries. So these leads we get are very difficult to manage and understand the nuances and complexities of each business to the point that our reps were spending so much time on pre-call research. It was like a quarter to a third of our reps' day were just being committed to these activities that aren't driving revenue, they're not driving opportunities.
Thanks to InsideSales.com, we've been able to eliminate the guesswork from the SDR position. We've been able to eliminate the biggest issue and the biggest frustration in their day, which is, who do I call?
So the Inside Sales product has pretty much taken out the thinking. So really what I do is concentrate on my prospect in the conversation, and that's helped improve my productivity.
It can be hard to keep things fresh and motivating.
I think that's good enough. If you'd like to watch the rest of the movie, feel free to contact me. Be more than happy to do that. Couple house cleaning items before we get going here. If you've not checked out our Sales Acceleration podcast, you are missing out. We talk all things marketing, sales operations every Monday, every Thursday. Having a blast. Check it out on iTunes, Sales Acceleration Podcast. Now, for those of you who are wondering, webinar will be about 45 minutes. Feel free to use the hashtag InsideSalesWebinar. And then we promise we will get this out to you, and it will also be on demand. Now, with that, let's get into the fun. So I'm gonna let Dave introduce himself here in just a minute as well. But we're going to be talking about games buyers play and what you can do about it. And I want to, you know me, I'm Gabe Larson. I run what we call Inside Sales Labs. That's our research and best practice here at InsideSales.com. But we've got Dave Matson, who is the president and CEO of Sandler Training. And Dave, maybe you can introduce yourself, and then I wanted to ask the audience one question before we kind of jump in, if that's okay.
Sure. Yeah, it's Dave Matson, CEO of Sandler Training. I'll give you a quick overview of Sandler Training in a second or two, but happy to be here. Personally have trained thousands and thousands of salespeople, so I certainly have heard plenty of the games, Gabe, and love to share them with you today.
That's a perfect transition. So before we get in, I wanted to ask the audience, first of all, I want to make sure everybody knows how to use their question and answer, because we want to make this interactive throughout the webinar and also at the end. So if you can, go to your Q&A box, type in what games have you experienced your buyers playing. As we jump into the topic, we want Dave to be able to have some context. And I just want to throw out, Dave, while some people do this, is my own that I've seen. I was mentioning earlier that, we've just done a research study on kind of what happens at the end of the month. And boy, I'll tell you what, consumers are playing us. They wait till that last day, and some of it's on us, but a lot of it's on them. They wait till that last day of the month, the last day of the quarter, and they force us, force our hand to drop the price and make us look bad. So I'm seeing some other ones come in here. You've got Bart saying, call me in a couple weeks. Let me think about it. Christine says, using us as consultants. Todd says it's all about the price when it's really not. Ryan said, these are great ones, you guys. I won't talk to you unless I'm allowed to set the terms for this discussion. Is that right, Ryan? Oh man, that's a good one. Matt, these are good. Sorry, Dave, I wasn't going to go into them, but I'm getting hooked here. Matthew says, the kick the can game, right? So buyers are not being direct. Again, Bart says, call me in a couple. Let me think about it. Hide and seek, going dark. We got a lot of hide and seekers. No, that's a fantastic. So with that context, Dave, maybe hopefully you can help some of us figure out what to do about it. We've all got these games. What do we do about it? Over to you.
Well, let me just put it into context if I can. So as you said, a little bit about Sandler. We have heard those games and many more that haven't been said yet over the last 50 years. And I would put Sandler in an expert in a couple areas. One is selling. So we believe in a pull process versus push, because I think if you push people through the funnel, they tend to resist and, garbage in, garbage out. So we're big on disqualifying, stopping the game, calling the game, and we'll kind of talk a little bit about that in a second. But really, that's a conversational sales model. And, I think scripts are great, but oftentimes salespeople, we learn our scripts, but the prospect doesn't have their script. And then they say something that we didn't plan for, and we're completely thrown off guard. So how do we deal with that type of stuff? And over our training centers, we have a lot of people coming in struggling with how do I identify when there's a game? Because, Gabe, the people who have already identified the game, kudos to them. How many years did it take most of us to realize that they're actually playing a game that we had no idea, right? It's like playing fetch. They threw the tennis ball and said, "Here's the stall." We ran after it and said, "Oh my gosh, I'm about to close." And they said, "Oh no, let me throw that tennis ball one more time." And it takes a long time to learn these types of things. So we're just really good at it. And so I want to share with you really is some things on what are some of the games that people play. And I'm going to talk about it kind of tongue-in-cheek, Gabe, but I think that, why do people do it? Is it because they want to be cute? Are they trying to waste our time? I don't think so, because their time is just as valuable. And in today's environment, we really have to make sure that we protect ourselves about wasting time on the seller side as well. And that's a good mindset, because if we think that we're just getting dragged through the mud, we have to do something to stop this, whatever it is, in a very nice way, because they may not be a prospect today, but they may be a prospect in the future. So how do we do that? But I would say two things. One, the games that we complain about, that you were laughing at, we're reading, because we all know we've been there, we do the same thing to other salespeople when we're buying. I mean, it's true. So everything that we just heard that we are victims of, we love to victimize others in a situation when we put our buyer hat on.
True. So true.
Yeah, I wish I could make that decision. Unfortunately, my wife's not here. Whatever it is, you can come up with a million of these things. And we do it too. And that's why it's almost this dirty little secret that we have amongst ourselves. But I also think it's self-protection. I mean, really, if you look at, and I'll even go to Hollywood for a second, how many movies are out there about sales? You've got a million of them, way back when with 10 Men, and then you got The Wolf of Wall Street, and, Boiler Room, a million of them. But no one has a great movie on all the things that we actually do and the value that we bring to society, and it's just an awesome profession. They set it up as a predator type environment. So people are just saying, let's protect ourselves, right? I remember I told my parents I was going into sales. They honestly thought that I was going to move right back into the house because I must be unemployed. And that's what they had thought, because they're not accustomed to that. And so, so how do we do it? Well, I think there's a couple games that we may have seen. One is, they feign interest. So what does that mean? I think there's two different things going on. One is they withhold information. They keep their cards close to the vest. I'm going to call it that, because I heard that in some of the things that you say. They don't say, when you come in and say, Mr. and Mrs. Prospect, hey, thanks for inviting me in today. Can you tell me a little bit about what's going on? A lot of people downplay. They hold their cards close to the vest. They don't want to say to you, hey, I'm so glad you're here. We have a real serious problem in service, and this is what it's costing us, and here's the ripple effect, and we're losing clients, and it's a real, real problem. I need you. We're in trouble. They don't come right out and say those types of things, because in their mind, I go back to the movies, they think that all that information that you openly shared would be used against them, And all of a suddenly, now the price is going up, the more you need them. So they have to downplay that interest. They just kind of say, well, I'm not sure. We may have an interest. Things are okay, but certainly service could be better. And they just push it down because, again, they don't want to tell you how bad it hurts because they think if it hurts badly, then that's a high price. I'll even give you an example. Let's do how we do the same thing with us. Let's say I'm shopping for a red couch, and I know it's a red couch. I know what color. I know the measurements. I know what I want to spend. I go into a furniture store, and immediately one of 300 people waiting for me to walk through the door approaches me, and they say, "May I help you?" Now, Gabe, what do 99% of the people say? I'm just looking.
Nope, I'm just browsing.
Yeah, exactly. But we've already had this discussion in the car, my wife and I. We know how much we're taking. And in my mind, I'm trying to get out of there in exactly, 14 minutes because that's how I shop. But nope, just looking. Because if I said I had a $3,500 budget, in my mind, you're going to take me to the $35,000 to $5,000, where I could have, if I was smart, found the exact same thing that I really wanted in my fantasy world for $700 or whatever it is. So I protect myself. Now, we've all seen it. We've all seen this happen. So when people say, I'm not sure I have interest, unfortunately, the amateur salespeople, we try to throw more stuff on. Well, would you have interest? And then we throw the features and benefits on, and then we throw the pricing thing on, right? But you really would have interest if it was so much less, wouldn't you? All that stuff gets kicked in. So I think that's one of them. But the opposite is true, too. So we withhold information, but the buyer also over-exaggerates interest, but for a different reason. So one is, I don't want you to know how bad it is because I think you're going to use that information against me. The flip side is they over-exaggerate their interest because they want to keep their current vendor partner honest. They want to see what else is new in the marketplace that they're not aware of, so they could do it without you for less. And so that stuff sounds like, hey, I'm so happy you guys are here. We've had this particular, vendor here for about 10 years, and it's time for a change. We really are looking for some innovative things to do so you can just, rock our world. Help us become more innovative. Help us become more, more efficient in what we're doing. We need help. And they just paint this up. And you can see a salesperson, especially towards the end of the month, as you said, they're just going, oh my gosh, this is a home run. You mean the prospect's mouth's moving? Salesperson's already spending the money. They don't even hear what they're doing. They're talking to themselves on some beach, on an island, spending the commission, and they get excited. They get pumped up. Because what are they doing? Well, they're hooking us, right? Because they want to know all of the things. Doesn't mean that they're a prospect, but as salespeople, we lose more than we win. Really think about it as a profession. It's kind of, we put ourselves into a lose situation. We lose more than we win. So when somebody says they are excited to see us, they are a prospect, they have needs for what we sell, we're almost like, whew, thank goodness. When the first time I heard that, Gabe, I thought I was on candid camera. I was looking around for the cameras. I'm like, really? Because that's never happened to me before, So, but I want to be there. It's better than going and getting rejected somewhere else. So,
Right.
I think, let me ask you, you've seen some of those things, right, where we're either downplaying interest or we're over-exaggerating how bad we need you. It's common. Fair?
It is, absolutely. I think it's, like you said, it's the game we play.
It's the game we play. So the question then is, okay, that's step one. Now, I believe the buyers, we have been trained at a very early age.
Dave, just real quick question on that, because we've got a couple questions coming in, and
sure.
A couple people have said, are they games, or now are they just part of the buying process? This is just, it's just, it's part and parcel of what we have to deal with as salespeople and sales leaders.
Well, it depends on how you look at it. I think if it's just part of the process, then you've just come to accept it, right? So if somebody, for instance, in my qualifying stage, I'm looking for paying money decision. If somebody's not going to share a piece of information, that I have to make a conscious decision, am I proceeding or not? But if I heard no one's going to share their pain with me, no one's going to, then I would say, oh, okay, then I should just give my price and give everything blindly, and then I'll wait for the phone to ring with all the incoming orders. And that's just the way it's done. I don't believe that. Now, for instance, I'll give you an example. I had an IT person coming into my office yesterday, and they had a PowerPoint presentation. I mean, they had a deck. They wanted to share it with me. You know, they were showing up and throwing up all their stuff about how wonderful they were, and I had to stop them. And I said, look, let me just qualify myself if I can. Here's my problem. I have no interest in all that stuff. Here's what I'd like to have done. Here's what I need it done. I don't know how you would do it or how you would charge me. Let's talk about that. He was completely thrown off the game because in his mind, that really wasn't supposed to happen for another 46 minutes. So what do you mean? Wait a minute. So I think that if you have equal business stature in your mind, like I bring value, I deserve to be here versus I'm a subservient relationship where I'm so happy you've made time in your calendar because I inappropriately begged for an appointment. I think if you just change your mindset, it would be great. Hey, does Buffett, is he wandering around that he doesn't have the right to be there? What would he say? You know, what would he say if he was across selling something from us worth all that money? Wouldn't he say, hey, look, let's not waste a lot of each other's time here. Do you have any issues in the following couple of areas? Here's about what it's going to cost. He would have a very open discussion, and we would respond. I think when we start jockeying, it's like cards. Who shows up, and this is what prospects think, who shows up and says, I've got a straight. Before I put down my $10,000, what do you have? And everybody jockeys. Well, I got nothing. What do you mean you got nothing? Oh, I've got a great hand. I mean, so it's just like a buying situation. Right. It's kind of amazing. So I wouldn't buy into that. I think it's your mindset. But I also think that this process has been going on for a long, long time, and I think it's really gotten down to an awesome system that they follow. And again, we help them become better at it because we do the same thing. Every time I'm shopping for insurance, I over-exaggerate my position to the new agent because I want to know if I'm getting taken to the cleaners. If I'm out there shopping for cars, shopping for whatever, I always say I'm not interested. So this is just how it kind of works. But here's what happens. Let's assume for a second I'm in the buyer-seller situation, and I'm going to withhold. So I'm going to keep my cards close to the vest. And I'm sitting there, and they say, well, we don't really know if we have a lot of interest. It sounds interesting. I mean, what you've said, to be honest, has piqued our curiosity. Would you be nice enough to put what you just said in writing, maybe in a proposal, and come back and give us a presentation? And we are so excited because we say, oh, my gosh, that's interest. We love that. But that's a game. Right when they say, could you gather all that up and put it in writing? And how would you solve all these issues that we've talked about? And I remind you now, they've put about 600 issues on the table because it's really not a singular focused deal. And so now you're all of a sudden this massive business consultant to solve all problems in your area of expertise. And they say, could you come back and give us a presentation? Now, we throw all qualification out the window. Maybe we should say, love to do that. Can I ask you a couple questions beforehand? Because I have no idea what I would put in the document. See, if we were financially independent and didn't need the business, what would come out of our mouth is completely different than, oh my gosh, I got to hit my numbers by the end of the month. Because when I hear somebody say, put it in writing, come back and give me a presentation, which is game on, the salesperson says, you betcha. You betcha. Because, oh my gosh, I was about to have to go out and make more calls. This is so much safer. And they run back, and the whole group gets excited because I've got one, right? And then this is how sick it is, Gabe. I even beat up my manager to give me a better price to a suspect that I haven't even qualified so they would say yes, even though I don't even know their budget. So I'm out there. Now, here's the thing. Unpaid consulting. So this is where we're going to go back and do all of the things that we know. Because the fact of the matter is We are good at what we do. Salespeople we know our stuff. And the prospect wants to know what we know. They just don't want to pay for it, and maybe they'd like to do it internally or do it for less. And that's what they're doing, self-preservation, and I get that. But when we go and do all that free consulting without a commitment, we're in trouble. We're in trouble.
Yeah.
And people don't figure out what it costs to do all this, because if you have, and say there's multiple people that are going to come back and present this solution, because the bigger the economic deal, the more people get involved, right? This is what happens. If you have 2 or 3 people there, now suddenly the cost of this sale is going through the roof. So it's there. And, I always ask salespeople sometimes, they say, hey, I got a big presentation tomorrow. I said, hey, that's great. On average, it costs about $35,000, $36,000 in your industry to do a presentation. If that was your money, would you be doing it? Oh, no way, they're not buying. I'm like, what? Why would you have wasted all that time? But who knows? But here's the next stage. Here's what happens. You show up, and now they've got some people probably that you haven't seen before because they want to hear what you're about to share, and you do your thing. I mean, you're blowing and going. You're doing your thing. And then somewhere we do that trial close that we were taught. About 46 minutes into it, you take a deep breath and you say, so what do you think? Right? So that's your close, evidently. And then here's the next game that happens, which is awesome. First, they give you a compliment. That was one of the most insightful, really insightful meetings I've been sitting in a long, long time. We have learned so much today. Now, a salesperson, just their self-esteem, they're pumped up. Their shirt buttons are about to pop. They're like, yes, I am such a content machine. And they get so excited. But they give us that because here's what's coming next, which is they commit to nothing. And it'll sound like this after they say, this is one of the most insightful presentations we've seen in a long time. I really honestly think there's a place for us to do business in the future. I'd like to suggest the following steps. First of all, I'd like to say we didn't expect to get wild like this. But since we are, I'd like to form a committee to start a study to see how we would implement the things that you shared here today within our company, because I really do see a long-term partnership here. That's how it starts. And you're like, yes. But yes was what? They committed to absolutely nothing. Right? They gave you a great compliment. I mean, I've watched salespeople get letters from the company saying how wonderful they were, which means you're not getting any money, because that's what happens. It's part of the game. So they commit to nothing by saying we've got to form a committee to start a study, or it's something else like, hey, let us incubate this. There's a lot of information. Let us digest it. Let us do this, all that stuff. And then time goes by. You leave. You're pumped. I mean, you're high-fiving yourself in the elevator. It's awesome. And now you're at your office. And what happens? They disappear. There's no calls. You're leaving messages. You almost feel like a stalker, right? You're leaving your cell phone. You're leaving your home phone. You get your manager call. You're dropping the price on voicemail.
So true.
Anything to get a response. And that's it. Those are some typical games, and you'll hear that all the time. And I've heard games like, hey, we've got a new person starting in their position in 3 months. We're going to, make sure that they're involved because it's important that they're involved. That's kick the can down the hallway there for a little bit. All these things. And by the way, those committees that they're talking about are super secret. You've never met any committee member. That's what normally happens. So these are people that pop out of nowhere that you've never actually seen before. So I think those are some of the things that popped up on the screen, I think, Gabe.
Yeah, all over. We'll have to save some of these to the end, Dave, but there's a lot of questions because a lot of people are facing these types of situations, and I'm sure you'll get into that a little bit. But, we've got Jeff Anderton who said, well, I feel like you've nailed it, Dave, but my competitors, for example, are offering free consulting, and so I don't know how to deal with that when I'm faced with an awkward situation like that. Or we got Ryan Walsh who said, right, but I had someone who said, give me a proposal. And then Ryan said, sure, I'll give you this proposal, but what are you planning to do with it? And they just say, hey, give me the info. I need to compare it to X, Y, Z, and then they move on. So it feels like people are they're maybe recognizing these games, and they're trying to do one step, but it ends up still just kind of leading to the same place where you ended.
Yeah, I think so, and maybe we'll get to some of the how do you overcome that stuff, because even proof of concept, when people are doing proof of concept in the technology world, they say, well, that's just how we sell. And I'm a big proponent of that. But if you don't have a clear understanding of what's going to happen when that beta goes well, and what's happening as a result of that, and here's the meeting by which we're talking about it, you never actually close on that proof of concept. And if somebody says, hey, listen, I'm going to stack you up against anywhere else, I'd say, awesome. I look forward to that. My track record's great. Can you give me the criteria by which you make those decisions to make sure I nail every one of those? And they don't have one. And then I always say, well, let's create one real quick together. And now if you can co-create that, you're better. If somebody says, Dave, could you do a presentation? I said, I'm about to do that. I always co-create it with you. Let's start from the top. And you just take that piece and you start creating it with them. Because once
I love
they
that.
fingerprint
I love that.
Yeah, always agree, but have them participate. Because when they fingerprint it, when they give it, hey, this is our work product, it's easy. People never argue with their own data. Whatever you come up with, they'll edit. But if they helped you create it, it's great. I mean, we're married. We know how this works, right? I mean, if it's a team decision, it's much better. So that's how it works. But, we step on our own feet as traditional salespeople. We go in, we try to get rapport, but we do it, unfortunately, the wrong way. We look at pictures. Oh, I went there too. Oh, yes, this was great. And we think that we're now aligned, right? And then we'll create some interest, which is, hey, would you have interest if I could do this? Would you do that? And what we've done is we haven't actually qualified. We do a presentation too early in the process. If you ask most salespeople, what they end up doing is they present early in the process, trying to wow their prospects. And all the games that we're talking about here is because we probably haven't done a good job qualifying ahead of time. See, I think the value of a salesperson is determined by the information that you gather, not dispense. And that's where we get into trouble most of the time.
Interesting. So a question for you, Dave. We've got Tom here. Tom Denton from AMI. And so we talked just a little bit about this qualification concept, right? So a lot of research out there saying, hey, people, especially prospects, they're further down the sales process because they can do a lot of research themselves. So they won't maybe allow us to do as much qualification as we did in the past because, again, they've done the research and they've qualified us. So thoughts on that? Do you believe that qualification it's something of the past, or do you do it differently now that buyers are more educated, or how do you get around some of these quote-unquote newer age concepts?
Well, I think we all have the ability to go on the internet and research. I certainly research all of my physical ailments before I go see the doctor. Doesn't mean I'm right? But I don't go in there.
I am the doctor.
I say, hey, doctor, listen, before you do any x-rays, I want to tell you right up front, here's the situation. I'm willing to pay this, and therefore that's malpractice. We buy into that. So I'll always say, when I'm with a prospect, I say, look, I'm normally in front of a couple different groups. One's done a ton of research, and others aren't really sure what the issue is. And, there's some discussions. I have a longer speech, but I say, where do you fit? Oh, we've done a ton of research. That's wonderful. So what have you identified as your top 2 or 3 issues? You should use the fact that they did it as your beginning conversation versus just checking off the box research. What I found is the majority of people who have done the research sometimes are actually come to the conclusion, and they're solving the symptom, not the problem.
Yeah, that's great. So that's a little that judo rather than boxing kind of approach there, because I do think a lot of reps, right? And Tom, I'd be interested to hear kind of your feelings on that response from Dave. But, as reps, we do want to go to our needs audit, our discovery questions that just go, okay, let me go check the box. And it doesn't bring in, you could actually use that research in a judo play to your advantage. I like it.
Absolutely. And I would say, hey, look, I know you've done your research. I've got so many different options on how I could potentially solve the issue, which, by the way, I'm not even sure I can at this point. With your permission, can I ask you 10 or 15 minutes worth of questions so I can really narrow down my recommendation on how to solve this issue? I've yet to have a person say no to me. And so here's some key phrases. With your permission, they always say yes. You don't say, hey, can I take 3 days? No one wants 3 days. But once you start asking questions, then they're going to start talking. And by the way, that's a great conversation. Sales should be conversational. You should be asking a lot of questions. When my doctor asks me questions, I love it.
The thing I like that you said is you can go in partially with the judo play of research, but you could actually say something like, hey, what I've found when people are doing research, here's some of the things they've run into. Back to qualification, are these some of the things you've run into? That I think I like some of those judo plays. I think they're pretty powerful.
Yeah, I think, for us, I think you should go in with your top 2 or 3 pain indicators. I'll call them like a 30-second commercial. I've typically found people like yourself are experiencing these types of challenges, and you just bang them with those pain indicators, and they'll say, yep, nope. And it is great. And I think the higher D, those people who just want to cut to the chase, let's not socialize, really don't care what happened about your weekend, those people I love to get into, because you just ask a quick question, they'll bang it. They come right back at you. I love that. Yeah. I think it's when you go into what you said was magical. I, as a salesperson, have a step-by-step process that I must follow and I cannot deviate. That's where we get into trouble. That's where the games outplay us, because they can adjust like any other sports team. When we don't adjust our plays, they're going to adjust theirs, and then it's who's leading the dance, really? Who is leading the dance? I think salespeople, we need to lead that dance. We need to lead it with our questions. We need to lead it by setting up a good agenda so you have the position of asking those questions, which I'll share. It's all in your mindset. We talked about that. But I think if you think differently, and if you just say to yourself, in the car, I need to answer the following X amount of questions, how you get there, you should have that flexibility, because every buyer is different. But you should stay on your game. You should stay on your playbook. And if you'd like, let me kind of walk you through a couple maybe tactics and strategies on how people could think about it. For us, I think you should have a system. And most of the people on the phone, if you really ask them, and it was just us, no one was looking over their shoulder, could you write down the system or process that you follow from the time that you're thinking about prospecting to the time you're selling additional products and services to your customer? Jot it down. And I've done this for 30 years, Gabe, and very few people can actually write down their system. And that's why the game.
Well, I think the misnomer is we think maybe we have a system in that we have like opportunity stages, but you're not talking about opportunity stage. That's not a system. That's a random process that some guy from ops set up.
Yeah, exactly. I think you should be able to say, here are the steps that I follow, and from that, look, here's quickly. I'll say you should be able to go in and profile what type of buyer you have. I mean, you should be able to do that in a couple seconds, who's who, and people buy from people, and they're going to buy from people who they like. The minute you start falling back to they've got the advantage and they're the robot, I think you're in trouble. I just think you need to humanize it and really you separate yourself not by price, not by your products. It's really they buy who's in front of them. They buy who's
people
in front of them.
People buy people, they don't buy products. Yeah.
Yeah. I can't tell you how many times I've stopped the games when I say to a prospect, based on what I've heard thus far, I don't think we may be for you. And they're like, what do you mean? I said, well, we're really good at helping people who have these types of problems, and I list, my pain indicators, but I haven't heard that, and I may not be for you. I may be able to recommend you to somebody else. Next thing you know, wait a minute now, I've got this, and this issue, but once you call the game by just saying we may not be for you, then boom, it's a pattern interrupt, and now they're right back on track. It's kind of cool.
Yeah. Wow. Dave, real quick, that's probably one of the most empowering things I've probably heard in the last, month, probably this year. It's so empowering as a sales rep to take that on and say, you know what? People don't buy products, they buy people. That takes, it's on you to establish that credibility. It's not the product, but you. And if you can do that, my goodness, I think you're going to be in a whole different ballgame. I like that. I got that one written down.
Yeah, well, even when people say, hey, we've got a great service, I think a lot of things that we tout are minimal, entries into the game these days. And by the way, we all sound the same. I mean, if you ask people, what are the top 3 reasons why I should buy from you? And if everyone on the line today answered that question, they'll say things like value, reputation, blah, 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 right? Now, you know that your buyers are calling on your competitors. So if I'm saying I have the best service, I have the best product, I have the best reputation, when I leave the room, my competitor comes in, and my prospect says to them, what are the top 3 reasons I should buy from you? Oh, great service. Oh, we're the best. I mean, who shows up and says, Gabe, before we start today, I'd like to tell you a little bit about our company. Our service is terrible. I mean, it is the worst. We have the lowest price because you'll never, ever talk to a human again. You're going to get stuck in our voicemail system, and that's the end of that. I mean, we are all great, right? So you have to break through it. We play the same games as sellers in a way, if you think about it. So I think you need a system. Now, you can follow our system, but it doesn't much matter. Of course, I'm biased, but you need a process so here's the rule. Know where you are and know exactly what you need to do in order to get to the next step. So,
Dave, question on this. So we got Ryan Walsh. Good question here, Ryan. I want to throw out. So Ryan says, okay, so let's say we've got a system. How much do I need to man up to a system? And I use that word hopefully appropriately, but do I walk away from a meeting if the prospect who before the meeting agreed to an agenda and meeting participants, wants to depart from it and actually, do something completely different? Do I try to stick really rigid to my plan, or do I this is a very tactical kind of question there, but do I stick to my system, or is there leniency to say, you know what, I'm adaptable?
Well, I think you should be adaptable, but I'm going to answer his question specifically, and then I'm going to give you a slightly different answer. I think by sending somebody an agenda ahead of time isn't good enough. I think you need to start every single meeting covering the following things. After you say, hey, thanks for inviting me in, and oh my gosh, the weather's terrible, whatever you do there, just 1, review the purpose. 2, review the time that you have for today's meeting, even though you've sent it, because what I'm trying to avoid is people looking at their watch 20 minutes into it and saying, hey, Dave, this is awesome, but we've got a real fire today. Could you just put this in writing? I'm going to stop that game. I said, hey, on the phone we talked about 45 minutes. Is that still good for today? So I'm verifying my time. Next thing I'm going to verify, Gabe, which will fix his problem, is I'm going to say, here are the 2 or 3 things that I'm hoping to cover today. I know we talked about it. I think if you did an agenda ahead of time, here's what you've mentioned. Any additions or subtractions, or you say, what are the top 2 or 3 things you want to make sure that we cover today in order for this to be as effective as possible for you? And then the last thing you should cover is, hey, if things go well, here's what I think some proposed next steps are. I tell people up front what I'm going to try to close for at the end of the meeting, so they're not surprised. If you would cover those things every single time, these agenda bombs that are thrown into the meeting will disappear. They disappear because you've already dealt with it. Then you can decide, do I want to continue or not? Now, do I have people who aren't going to play ball? If I know in my heart of hearts that if I didn't have, let's say they're not going to give me the decision and budget information, hypothetically. If I know intuitively, if I don't even track it, that there's probably a 3 or 4% chance that I'm ever going to get that business because I can't actually propose anything because I don't know the budget, or whatever it is a valuable piece of information in your selling process, I think you should walk. And by the way, if they let you walk, they're never buying anyways. I've yet to have somebody who wanted to buy from Sandler, regardless of what games they were playing, let me leave. The way that I level the playing field is I say to them, there may not be a fit. I close the file. When I close the file in a meeting, If they let me, I say, guess what? I never even had that deal. Because you can't lose anything you never had. It's when you're in the hope sales process, you're going to buy into everything. And I think that's the mistake.
Yeah, so interesting.
I think, we are all at this, and, they see this slide up there called Wimp Junction. I think we're there, because, and that's really what he's asking in a different way. And it's saying, look, I have the buyer system. They're asking me for free consulting, and I've always done free consulting. It hasn't worked, but I don't know another way. Or, they're kicking it down the can or whatever they're doing. And on the other side, you should adopt a system and be willing to follow it. Like, I don't want my airline pilot to say, today it's kind of interesting. We've had some hail. We've got lots of stuff stuck in the engine. Let's just bypass that and take off today. I don't think that's how it works. It's in sales that we bypass the systems. But eventually you're going to have to ask yourself, am I going to wimp out and acquiesce to what I know is a dismal failure of my time and outcome, or am I going to man up, as you said, and say, hey, look, I need this information in order to proceed, or there may not be a fit, and let them decide. See, this is the magical moment. I would tell everyone, let the prospect decide if it's over. You don't have to wonder. You can just say, in order for me to really help you, I need the answers to the following 2 questions. I don't know how to get it yet. And if they say, well, I'm never doing it, that's okay. They just made that decision. But for you to fantasize the conversation is a big mistake. I think that's where we fall apart.
So it sounds like, I love the pilot analogy. I mean, if they're going to run their system, you got to stick to their system. So we got Andrew here, asking and saying, hey, and some of these are tactical, David. He says, I've got these stringers or people that string me along for months and months and months, and they can never get around to discuss. I guess the same kind of principle applies. It's like you've got to, not give them an out, but kind of throw that out there. Look, if this isn't good, this may not be the best solution. It looks like it's not the right time or the right thing for you. And you let them kind of make that decision, but you present it to them.
Absolutely. Hey, listen, let me even do a voicemail jail, because it's when we're stalking, and they disappear. That was a lot of the ones that you started off with. I can't find them. They're disappearing. And I think they disappear once they get that free consulting. A voicemail that I know works at least 36% of the time. At least. If you would do something like this, because if I lead up to it, you've called, they don't return. You've called, you don't return. You've tried every trick in the book. They're just not calling you, right? And so instead, you could just leave a voice message. Gabe, hey, it's Dave. I know I've left you a couple messages, and we were talking about XYZ. Left you a couple messages. Haven't heard back. I get the feeling you guys have decided to go in a different direction, or there's some bigger fire that's popped up, whatever the case may be. But would you be nice enough to just leave me a voicemail after hours, just giving me a heads up that you guys have gone in a different direction? I'd appreciate it. That's all you need to say. Yeah. And what happens is, if I'm with you for like a 2-day boot camp, I'll do that little, trick there at 9:30 the first day and say, whoever gets the first response, I'll give you X. You would be shocked how many people are playing voicemails. I've chased this person for 6 months. They just returned the call. Why? Because here's why. I got the feeling you guys decided to go in a different direction, which is okay. But would you be nice enough to just leave me a voicemail after hours? No pressure, right? Because most salespeople say, Gabe, I'm at my desk waiting with my manager. Please call immediately. Gabe, you didn't call. I'm still here. Please call immediately. Gabe, here are my parents' numbers. I'm going to be with them all weekend. Please call immediately. Man,
you're basically you're basically describing my college dating experience. I was that guy who, I thought you loved me. Why aren't you calling me back?
Exactly. You must have lost my number. Yeah.
Yeah. But I guess you're right. You got to set up these boundaries. Yep.
So maybe with that, if there's some Q&A, we could talk all day long. I'd love to share the Sandler selling system. But really, in essence, if there's something that if there's some Q&A that's popped up that hasn't been there, happy to give them some tactics. I think the bottom line is, though, follow a system. If you trust it, don't deviate from it. If you don't trust it, adjust it until you do trust it. I mean, that's really,
Yeah.
I trust mine, and I'm going to trust mine, and that's the end of it. And if you don't fit in, it's okay. It's okay. Because I think you also, Gabe, should get points for disqualifying prospects. We only get points from our sales leaders for what's in the funnel, and that is really backwards. That's backwards. Sandler, David Sandler, when I worked for him, David Sandler would say, I was on a 6-week selling cycle for what I was doing for him at the time. And he would come in about week 8 and say to me, hey, what's going on there? I said, well, these are all happening. And he would say to me, guess what? You have exactly, a week, and I'm taking all those files away from you. Like, what? So he would make me call and literally close the file and say, it's obvious something's come up or there's no way we're going to be doing business. I understand that. And I would have other little tactics. I must have done something. I apologize. I'm not sure what it was. And I would take personal responsibility for it. And the minute I took personal responsibility, no, Dave, it's not you. There's a new person in charge. Here's what's going on. And so all those little things happened. But the minute I said I had to close the file, which is where I learned the lesson, more business came through the front door.
Well, that concept, I think there's a couple good books out there, about getting to the no or the power of no. And there's something in sales, I fall into this truthfully. I fall into my, with my wife and my kids and certainly in sales. But I'm sometimes a yes man, it's like prospect says jump. I just say how high and, it's just yes. But there is something about kind of, you don't have to say no out loud potentially, but kind of sticking to your guns and saying, you know what? It looks like this isn't going to work for you. I'm going to disqualify you out and kind of almost get to that no rather than always pushing yes. I think there, again, is some power in that idea. Well, Dave, I know we're coming to kind of the end here. You've answered, already a dozen questions. There's another 2 dozen in the queue. Let's take a minute and just go through a couple of these. And then we can kind of wrap up here. Certainly for those of you who are still looking at the screen, a great takeaway here, the idea of a system and getting some pre-consultation from Sandler. I will vouch for that 100%. We use Sandler here internally at InsideSales.com, and we've seen some great benefits from it. But a couple of questions here, Dave. So Brendan coming from Salesforce says, I feel like a lot of this is around kind of a direct initial sale. How might some of these apply for existing customers as we think about upsells? Does the same concept apply, or do you think of it a lot differently?
I don't think of it differently, and big fan of Salesforce, and I think they're Sandler clients as well. Here's how I would do it. Most of my clients I live with for a long time, but I do think I go into it in a conversational way. And then I'll say things like, hey, I'm not sure this is for you, but can I take 5 minutes and explain a thought that I had about your particular situation? You can tell me whether it's worth investing time for us to continue the discussion. I think if you were to do little steps along the way, and if I've known you for a long time, I could say things like, hey, Gabe, so there's a disconnect somewhere. I can't figure it out. So either I've gone astray or this is not of interest to you. Tell me where we are. Because listen, we've been dealing with each other for a long time. I don't want to waste your time if I'm off track. I take the responsibility for saying that I went astray and maybe I'm wasting the time because you're too polite. See, you're my client. You're not going to want to hurt my feelings. So I end up doing that. The other thing that he can be doing is when you're talking to a long-term client, always ask them, is this one of the top 2 or 3 initiatives that are important to you for this year? And I always ask that because if somebody says, well, not really, it's like number, I don't even know if it's on the top 10. Chances are they're not doing it, Yeah. And so I would always do that, So I think my clients are just like Salesforce's clients are with me for a long time. What we're talking about is in the context that sounds transactional, but the philosophies work in ongoing relationships, regardless if they're in your personal or your business side.
Right. Well, I really like the idea of, and this one thing I like about the Sandler system is sometimes even just the word commitment, you get some of these little commitments and it ends up leading to a larger commitment as we go through and kind of follow a structure and a process. Let's continue. We got so many. I want to get a couple more here. So good question here about being a transactional model. So if I've got a transactional approach where, it's more customers are coming to me or it's a shorter sales cycle, did some of these, again, does this apply, or would you change this slightly as you think through some of it more of a quote-unquote transactional sales model?
Well, when I put up that slide of the Sandler selling system, the more longer-term, live with my client, that's the enterprise sales model.
Yes.
The Sandler selling system is baked into that. That's where Salesforce would say, okay, that's where we live. If it comes to a transactional model, people then can follow a portion of that, which is those 7 steps in the sub. And honestly, I think it is the same. I think if you're going to do a transactional sales model, the faster you can get this level conversation, the better off you are, because you will be commoditized. They're going to just jump to you, and the next thing you know, because it is a transactional sale, you're going to almost fall into the trap of the games much easier because you've already said, hey, it's a commodity. Now, commodity and transactional sales aren't necessarily linked, but we tend to abandon our process when we think it's a quick type of sale. I do the same 7 steps, whether it's a 1-hour sale or it's a 1-year sale. It just takes me longer, and I add other things into them, but I'm always making sure that I bring value. I know what my agenda is, or in my upfront contract, I never leave a meeting until I set the next agenda and who's going to be there. Nothing really changes, and I'm super sensitive that I follow my system when I have long-term clients, because I tend to abandon my initial process that I had when I got you as a customer. But I think, it's my job to go deep and wide. It's my job to make sure that I've expanded your thought process and bring new things to the table that you haven't been aware of. I do all the same things. I live in that Salesforce world, but I grew up in the transactional world. So it does work, and Sandler clients follow, they're all over the place, whether there's transactional or more of a enterprise sales. So I say follow your system. Just adjust it.
So I love it. So a couple tactical questions here. A couple of people asked about, when having to deal with RFPs. So I'm going to see if I can paraphrase this from Adam Wolf here. So he was asked to submit answers for an RFP. Now, he had submitted something similar to a prospect several years ago. When asked, he was told that the decision makers are not speaking or meeting with anyone. You can submit questions to the gatekeeper, and they'll try to get you some answers. So he says, my training tells me I probably shouldn't pursue this, but it's a large potential client. We are qualified to provide these services. I'm not feeling a lot of pressure to pursue it, but I'm not quite sure what I should do. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, we're all falling into that camp. So, I think first you should start to do, again, your historical perspective. How many of those do you actually win? And let's assume that it's a low number or a high number. You decide what it is. But I know if we don't get to talk to anybody, and I'm talking to a gatekeeper who actually has no understanding of the business issues, I have a little or no chance of getting that business. And so I waste a lot less time. Now, he may have come to a different decision. Here's my favorite line. You have to decide if it fits. And it fits for me sometimes, and sometimes it doesn't. But I'll always say we have to respectfully decline answering the RFP. We believe we're in a position to add value, but we don't have enough information for us to respond properly. And let it go and see what happens. When they call back, if they do call back, they want you on that list. And I'm just not one of the 3 that their company policy says, because they've already sent it out to 38 other people. Because corporations do have a policy. They have to have 3 of us. And the minute I start jumping out of the boat, if they let me jump, it's okay. If they don't let me jump, it's easy. And I've got a ton of calls, and I say, I understand you have protocol, and I certainly respect it, but we do too. And I cannot propose stuff that I don't understand the business issues. Who can I end up talking to? And so I'll do it that way. You also, listen, in today's technology, if our prospects are researching us, why don't you research who's buying on that side? It's not that difficult. You can figure it out and start dripping content and start figuring out who in that organization is most likely purchasing and connect with them through LinkedIn and others and start doing your thing. But you have to decide that. Now, you can ask very technical questions. You can ask all the questions that you need to make sure that you are a fit. And you can decide. There's a million ways to answer that. We do, whether it's government or others, but I think you have to come up with A, what information do you need before you proceed, and then how else would you get it? I mean, most of the time the business people talk to me because I bypass the gatekeeper and most people say, well, Dave, if you bypass the gatekeeper, you're going to upset them. I don't really care because I'm never going to see that gatekeeper anyways when it comes to this situation. You know, when I have one of 6 committee members and they're my gatekeeper, I've got to handle that a little differently. But when I have somebody just gathering 38 things so they can put it into a metrics of who's answered what, I don't really care. And if they say, hey, you broke the rules, you're out, okay, that's fine. But because I know my stats, my closing rate would have gone up. So you just have to know your business a little and then decide how far you're going to push the envelope.
Yeah, wow. Interesting, Dave. Well, there's certainly, I know we kind of are coming to the end here. Still a couple more questions. What we'll do, everybody, you know, Ryan, Leslie, Dave, a couple other questions. We'll make sure that the Sandler team and ourselves that we review those questions and see if we can't get answers back out to you. But we are going to wrap up here due to time constraints. Again, 2 offers. I just want to throw out one more time. Make sure you do look at the Sandler free training session. You definitely will get value from that. In addition, as we think about outreach strategies, InsideSales.com, some great outreach strategies proven to work in your business. And I assume I speak for Dave here, but we definitely would love to continue the conversation. We will be offended if you don't add us on LinkedIn or follow us on Twitter. And with that, Dave, I'll give you closing remarks.
You know, once again, I just think, listen, you can't lose anything you don't have. Trust in yourself. It's okay. Have a game plan. Be willing to adjust. At the end of the day, you know, you can make that call. And I would just say you can't lose anything that you don't have. And you should go into it with equal business stature. And just realize sometimes when you say yes, hey, I understand that's a game, that's because you do it too, Gabe, and that's the problem. So we are victims of ourselves sometimes. So keep it going.
Love it. Love it. All right. Well, everybody, thanks so much again, Sandler, for joining. Appreciate everybody for joining the webinar. We will be sending this out shortly. And with that, have a fantastic day.